You may get the feeling that something's happening in France's tech scene. Something special, something big. You're right. And you know what? It could be even better with you here. Bonjour, we're La French Tech. Founders, startup employees, investors, and community builders. From Paris to Hong Kong. From AI to smart cities. We are rising fast. Ready to scale up with you. We believe growth goes with progress, profit with purpose, and ultimately, we believe in a better tech for a better world. Feel like we're on the same page? Grab this opportunity to shape the world you want. You have never been more welcome. Join us.
Il ci arrivi la French Tech.
Join La French Tech.
Tiajou, la French Tech.
Venia para la French Tech.
Raggiungete la French Tech.
Join la French Tech.
Rejoignez la French Tech.
Hello and welcome to everyone interested in the topic of why tomorrow's smart cities must be green and inspired by nature.
We are Marion and Nathalie, coordinators of La French Tech Australia. We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today and pay respect to the elders past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today.
We also would like to thank the sponsors of the event, the French-Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry for the organization, as well as the French Embassy, Schneider Electric, Austrade, and all the sponsors of the events for their support.
Nathalie and myself met in Adelaide 1.5 years ago as part of our entrepreneur visa, the CISA program, supporting innovation in South Australia. We quickly got involved in the startup world in South Australia with our respective projects. I work with South Australian farmers and use the byproduct of the grain production to replace plastic drinking straw. Mr. Rye is Australia's first drinking straw 100% grown in South Australia.
An amazing startup. And I work with Australian wineries to propose solutions against fake wines. eBottle guarantees the wine provenance and the supply chain from the harvest to the drinking experience. Both being French entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, with a passion for entrepreneurship, the idea of creating a community helping each other has always been at the back of our mind. When the pandemic happened, we realized there was no platform referencing startups and French entrepreneurs in Australia. That's when we decided to take over La French Tech Australia 4 months ago, an existing community launched 4 years ago by a Sydney-based French entrepreneur, Léo Denez.
Our objective is to apply for the French Tech label next year in 2021. With a dynamic community of more than 1,200 members and join the 48 French Tech international communities based in more than 100 cities all around the world. La French Tech is a volunteer-based and caring community that creates connection between startups, entrepreneurs, investors, and community builders with the purpose of giving before receiving and empowers its ecosystem to take actions and lead projects.
Today, we are delighted to welcome Germain, one of our very first community leaders at La French Tech Australia. Germain, how are you?
I'm fantastic, thank you.
Nice to have you on board today. To better adapt in our fast-moving world, Gemma is convinced that we must look into nature and its teaching to resolve the various challenges of the 21st century. He is passionate about social and environmental entrepreneurship and deeply believes the businesses of today can lead the change when it comes to greener cities.
Germain is involved in the development of Urban Canopy in Australia, a French startup disrupting the urban landscape industry with a bold mission to accelerate the greening of our cities with innovative solutions to fight the effect of climate change and reconnect us with nature. Germain, the audience is all yours.
Well, Marion, Natalie, thanks very much for that great introduction. First of all, I'd like to thank every one of you for taking the time out of your day and being here with us. I would also like to thank the French-Australian Chamber of Commerce for putting the event together. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodian of the land on which we meet. I personally dial in from Wurundjeri country, and I pay my respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island elders, past and present. So the topic of this conference is shaping attractive cities. A good starting point might be to ask ourselves, what is an attractive city? What is an attractive city to you? Well, if you ask me, it is a nice place to live, to work and relax, a safe place with job opportunities, an enjoyable landscape, access to education, good transportation, and of course with nice people. So today, I'll try to demonstrate why we should look to nature to guide us towards shaping attractive, sustainable, and resilient cities. And I'll talk specifically about the concept of biomimicry and biophilia. I'm a very curious person, and for the last few years have been researching and learning about different topics regarding our common future and the big challenges we will be facing in the 21st century. Those challenges certainly apply to the city. So I've been studying topics from our economic models to our environmental impact and our energy use, but also topics like the rapid progress in technology, geopolitics, and human psychology. I believe it is important to have a holistic view of the current situation to better understand things like climate change, loss of biodiversity, or the impact of AI on our lives and social inequalities. My intuition has always told me that as human beings, the further away we go from nature, life's principle, the quicker and harder we will hit the wall. Through my research, I came across biomimicry and its principles. Biomimicry is a term coined by a lady called Janine Benyus in the 90s in the US, who has written a book about it. Janine tells us that biomimicry is the conscious emulation of nature's genius to create sustainable innovation. It's about copying nature's strategies, principles, designs, and processes. This philosophy deeply resonated with me, and I'll share with you today why I'm excited about its potential for the future of our cities. This is nothing new. Great thinkers throughout history have already realized the genius of nature and applied its principles. The principles of permaculture that a few of you must be familiar with very much falls under the biomimicry banner. To best describe biomimicry, I like the analogy presented by Idriss Abakan, a French scholar. He asked us to imagine we have all been living in a big room. So please imagine with me, we've all been living in one big room. And in that room, there was stuff all over the wall. And over time, we've realized that that stuff burns very well. So generation after generation, we have been using it to keep ourselves warm in winter. Some people have told us not to do it, but we didn't listen. We have become very proud of a level of comfort achieved with burning that stuff. But one day, we woke up and we realized we were standing in the middle of a library. And that stuff all over the wall that we've been burning were books. Books do indeed burn very well, but we know that's not what they're for. What is this library I'm talking about? Well, yeah, you got it. It is nature. And who are those people who told us not to burn those books? Aboriginal people, who have understood the value of nature's teachings for thousands of years. We know that the value of a book is in what's written in it and not in the paper itself. We must learn to apply the same understanding to the entire natural world. So what is nature, that library I'm talking about? Nature is 3.8 billion years of R&D, 3.8 billion years of trial, error, and optimization, 3.8 billion years of mistakes and corrections where failure is part of the process. Does that sound familiar? When we think about innovation, we think about the Silicon Valley. Think about how much has been created in the Silicon Valley, from the invention of a microprocessor to the invention of Airbnb. Well, this is just 50 years of innovation versus 3.8 billion years for nature. Nature is the single biggest laboratory on Earth. Any problem we face, nature has faced it before, found a solution, and optimized it over millenniums. As a consequence, nature is the biggest knowledge deposit in the world. There is a popular saying that says we can learn from anyone we meet. Well, similarly, we can learn from every species in nature. Every species we see, both fauna and flora, knowing that 99.9% of species who have ever lived are now extinct, if they are still here, means that they have done something fantastically well in terms of adaptation and resilience. See where I'm going with this in regards to our cities. In this library, any book you pick up will have something useful written in it. Every book is a species that can teach us something. A recipe for a life-saving medicine, an architectural plan, or a revolutionary building material. By looking at nature differently, we can dramatically speed up our R&D processes towards more sustainable solutions. Nature is high-tech. High-tech to the point we can't reproduce it. We can't recreate a cell from scratch, leave alone an organ or an organism. We are struggling to reproduce photosynthesis, one of the basic processes in life. There is so much unknown about the magic of life creation. We simply cannot keep on burning those books. We now know that knowledge is worth more than oil. Just look at the valuation of companies like Apple and Facebook versus companies like Shell and BP. Knowledge is the most precious and valuable commodity on Earth, not resources. The beauty of knowledge is that when you share it, you multiply it. Whereas when you share material goods, you divide them. Understanding that nature is by far the largest source of knowledge on Earth, biodiversity preservation becomes a highly strategic economic proposition, as every single species can give us the key to develop sustainable and profitable innovations. The best way to preserve the natural world is to look at it, be inspired by it, and learn from it. When using nature this way, we don't destroy it. Biomimicry allows us to create a new vision, a new dream, a new exciting potential future. Biomimicry could almost become an economic or political tool. As you can see, biomimicry philosophy is very profound and shows a path to redefine our relationship with the living world. I believe it is the mindset shift we need to overcome the many challenges we are faced with. Now, that was for the theory around biomimicry. Now let's talk about its real-life application. Students of biomimicry have established 3 levels: form, process, and system. I'm going to talk about those 3 aspects and then link them back to how we can apply them to improve our cities. First of all, let's talk about form. How can we learn about shapes found in the natural world? Does anyone know where the technology behind Velcro comes from? Well, it comes from some engineers getting sick of getting burrs stuck on their socks during mountain hikes. So they stopped, looked at it closely, and realized how clever this evolutionary principle to disperse seeds was, and decided to copy it. As a result, the first non-chemical reusable adhesive material was born. When you look through the window in an aircraft, have you ever wondered why the tip of the wings are curved up? Well, it is a design shape copied from the large birds of prey, such as the eagle. It dramatically reduces turbulences in the eagle flight. In civil aviation, the implementation of this simple aspect of nature's genius translates to 10% saving on kerosene consumption. Impressive. In Japan, when wanting to implement the bullet train, they were facing a problem going through the many tunnels located around the country. Indeed, the limited volume of air in those tunnels created increased turbulences and noise when going through them. In nature, the kingfisher travels seamlessly from air to water to catch its prey. The engineers therefore took inspiration in the shape of the kingfisher's beak to make the nose of his train. It allows for slick transition from one environment to the next. Another example, at the Beijing 2008 Olympics, in swimming, 25 new world records were set, the most records of any Olympics ever. That year was also the year most athletes were wearing the brand new Speedo's LZR Racer Supersuit. What a coincidence. It turned out that Speedo R&D teams got inspiration from shark skin. To become the top of the food chain in the ocean, the shark has had to develop pretty cool features, notably in its skin. It is the most aerodynamic surface known to man. Its particular microscopic pattern dramatically reduces water resistance. The swimsuit was then banned from any competitions with claim of technology doping. Looking even closer, researchers found that shark skin also prevents anything to cling onto it. You will never see a mussel stuck on a shark. But this also applies on a much smaller scale, like bacteria scale. This non-stick property is only achieved through structural patterns, no chemical used. Inspired by it, an American company is working on a surface that repels bacteria to be used on medical gloves and other surfaces that we want to keep clean of bacteria, again, without using any chemicals. How handy would that be in the current COVID situation? Now we'll move to the second aspect of biomimicry, processes. What does nature's manufacturing processes look like? Think about a spider web. Aside from its architectural beauty, the material made by the spider at comparable size is far stronger and more flexible than any material we manufacture. And this is done at ambient temperature, atmospheric pressure, and by eating flies and mosquitoes. Pretty impressive, isn't it? Another example is the tortoise shell. It has incredible mechanical strength. It is also made with minimum energy input and is 100% biodegradable. Those are only a couple of examples, but they give you a taste of nature's genius I'm talking about. To manufacture advanced materials, our current methods require lots of energy and resources. Think about the energy required to power the furnaces manufacturing the glass we use in our buildings. Same goes with concrete. And high-tech materials are usually made of combining many different elements, making them virtually impossible to recycle. In nature, energy is the main currency. To survive, any organism needs to spend less energy in finding food than the energy the food provides it with. Much like a trading business operates, you buy cheaper and you sell. A good example of this energy principle is our brain. Our brain is an energy-saving machine. This is to ensure survival, to ensure that when in a life or death situation, we have the necessary energy to react. This is why changing habits is so hard. Changing habits require energy to think and behave differently. And our brains makes it hard to use that energy for matters not involving survival. Energy use optimization is nature's key objective, but it cannot afford to do it by consuming more energy or resources the way we do it. It therefore does it through knowledge, as seen on those graphs. In other words, doing it smarter. This is the library I'm talking about. A good example of this are migratory birds. They can fly for hundreds or thousands of kilometers with minimum energy requirements, while a man-made drone will die within 1 hour of battery use. We're playing in different leagues. The other aspect is that nature only utilizes green chemistry, not using any harmful chemicals or elements. Therefore, anything nature produces is biodegradable. One creature's waste becomes another creature's treasure. Are you starting to see the power of this discipline? Now let's move to the third aspect, systems. We have all learned in school what an ecosystem is and how it operates. It's about understanding that what happens between different beings is as important as the beings themselves. Janine Benyus, the creator of Biomimicry, says that life's job is to create conditions conducive to life. Interesting statement. It is long-term thinking. How does my action of today impact my offspring's lives tomorrow? Since I cannot be there to physically look after my great-great-great-grandchildren, the best way to do it is to provide them with the best environment to live in, therefore preserving the ecosystem. Quite radical different way of thinking, isn't it? It can be a great ally to develop a more sustainable lifestyle. Circulation or transfer, movement, such an important concept. Circulation represents the lifeblood, quite literally, of any system. Economic systems, ecosystems, or living organism. In living organism, poor circulation of blood causes necrosis that can kill. In the biosphere, poor circulation of carbon, oxygen, water strangles life. Similarly, poor circulation of money, goods, resources, and services in our economies leads to economic necrosis. Earth, what a beautiful sight. For 3.8 billion years, planet Earth innovates, creates wealth, organizes, and manages resources and information. Does that sound familiar? Yep, but Earth does it without any incoming element into its system, other than solar energy. And it's been working for so long. That's what's called a sustainable organization. Now, how can we look at nature to build more resilient and sustainable cities, both in architecture and urbanism? Nature is the master in the conception, construction, and maintenance of housing. The famous hexagonal structure of a beehive being one of its most famous examples. Pure creative structural genius in terms of strength, weight, storage, isolation, and so forth. But we could look at other creatures. Look at this weaverbird. Fantastic abilities to create a beautiful and structurally sound nest. And it does it with plants waste found in its surrounding. How about the famous woodpecker? Can you imagine the shock absorption capabilities of its brains, absorbing huge amount of deceleration 1,000 times a day? Can you imagine if we were to try the same feat with our teeth? The bear dam, another ingenious housing. To go through hibernation, the bear needs stored energy. Did you know that the energy storage in a bear's fat is far denser than the best battery technology currently available in the market? Same story with a meerkat. They even invented the concept of chilling in the front yard. Let's talk about ants. For those who haven't done it, I strongly recommend the Bernard Werber book, Empire of the Ants. A scientific fiction portraying how similar human and ant society are. It's mind-boggling. Ants build entire cities on the ground. They have incredible society organization, distribution of labor, energy and food storage, education, and so forth. Ants have colonized and survived on all continents and have been around for millions of years, adapting to all environmental changes. There is so much we can learn from them. So what is the problem with our current city model? Well, I'll let you ponder on those figures. There is a huge disproportion between the number of people living in the city and the energy and resources they use. Said differently, city dwellers have a much greater environmental impact compared with their country counterparts. This is easily explainable since no energy or resources actually come from the city. So everything needs to come from somewhere else and be transported to the city. That in itself increases our carbon footprint. Cities operate on a predatory model of the natural world, extracting huge amounts of resources from elsewhere, sometimes really far away, to make our food, clothes, building materials, water, energy, and rejecting huge amounts of waste outside of it. This is contrary to the functioning of an ecosystem, where the ecosystem is self-sustainable, with only solar energy coming in. It manages itself within itself. Our cities are a good analogy to the way we currently treat nature, as a free source of resources and energy, and a free giant rubbish bin. What do you think? Do you reckon we're on the right track? Well, let's go back to my biomimicry and see how its principle can be applied to the city. First of all, form. I'll give you a few examples of what has already been done. This is La Sagrada Familia, iconic Barcelona Cathedral. If you've been there, you'll remember it. Antonio Gaudi, its famous architect, said he took inspiration from tree trunks and the forest canopy to build the cathedral ceiling. How stunning. Other iconic buildings from around the world, the London Egg and its unique natural shape, Gardens by the Bay in Singapore and its artificial forest shapes, and of course, our very own Sydney Opera House, that was inspired by seashells. All stunning architectural feats inspired by nature. This is the Munich Olympic Stadium, built in 1972. Its architect, Frei Otto, was very unconventional for its time, taking architectural inspiration from spider webs and soap bubbles. Well, I'm not going to introduce this building. Less known is the fact that Gustav Eiffel, the architect, took inspiration in the human femur bone to build a tower both strong and incredibly light for its size. It's in the way our bones are built and structured. We have wonders of engineering right inside our bodies. Now, I love this one. One Ocean in Yeosu in South Korea, built in 2012. The structure was designed to pay tribute to the ocean. Its facade mimics the gill of a fish using an innovative biological moving mechanism. Independent ribs or biomimetic louvers are used for air and light regulation. It also reminds us of the wave of the ocean. Genius. Now let's get deeper into what biomimicry or form can offer to our cities. Let me introduce the Eastgate Center in Zimbabwe. Built in 1996 by Mike Pierce, this building is entirely ventilated and cooled naturally. Its inspiration? The termite mounds found in the same country. The termites have invented such an inspiring engineering design to keep their home at constant temperature throughout the day and throughout the year by carefully opening and closing wind tunnels. The design traps the heat of the day in the building envelope only to liberate it at nighttime through the cool breeze. Cool air comes through the bottom of the building and goes up through the central column, cooling it down. Thanks to this clever bio-inspired design, the building uses 90% less energy compared to traditionally cooled buildings. Now let me finish this series heading back home with the Council House 2 in Melbourne. Imagined by the same architect as the Eastgate Centre, Mr. Mike Pierce, it uses similar principles. As a result, the building, listen to this, uses 85% less electricity and gas, and only 30% of traditional water supply requirements. Australia certainly has some great showcase of what the city of tomorrow could look like. Go and check out the website, some great videos in there. Now let's move to the second aspect of biomimicry, processes, and namely building material manufacturing processes. We see CO2 as a dangerous gas, but in nature, carbon is a building block. This is what trees or corals are made of. How can we copy nature and use carbon as a building block? Well, as you can see, a Canadian company offers a brick made out of CO2. It captures CO2 and injects it into its bricks, trapping it forever. How about that to fight against climate change? Here is another example, CLT, or Cross-Laminated Timber. This is high-tech timber. Did I say high-tech? Yes, I said high-tech timber. When engineered properly, timber has similar property to reinforced concrete, but a fraction of its environmental impact. We can build skyscrapers out of CLT. If the sourcing forests are managed properly, it is a truly renewable building material. CLT has already been used in Australia and certainly is the way of the future. Now, my favorite. I'm sure you have already seen fireflies and glowworms. Magical, isn't it? Well, that biological light process is called bioluminescence. It exists on land, but is mainly found in the depth of the ocean, where natural light is gone. Remember Nemo's adventures? Well, a French biotechnology company is working on replicating this process to light up our cities. Think glowworm on steroids. It sequences DNA of bioluminescent squid to incorporate it in bacteria living in our atmospheric condition. Think about it. Living, breathing light. No electricity required. Moving on to the third aspect, systems, and more particularly ecosystems, and how we could apply those principles to our cities. Nature provides us with so many services, from life support in CO2 capture or waste recycling into compost, supply, water recreation or food production, regulation in oxygen production and air purification, and cultural services. I'll let you look through those for yourself. But when we sit down and look at this list, we realize how generous and essential nature is in our everyday lives. In our society is governed by economic growth. The problem is that there is no monetary value put on these services, making them free from an economic standpoint. We must integrate and foster these services. As nature does, we must create conditions conducive to life for future generations. The city of the future must tend towards being more self-sustaining and regenerative. It must have its own lungs, its own digestive system, and waste management system. Take Copenhagen for an example. The council decided to clean all the city streams and the harbour. As a result, people can freely swim in it at their leisure. Imagine if we could do the same in the Sydney Harbour, Yarra River or Brisbane River. Something good for the environment is also good for the locals. Nature always works on win-win principles. Our very own human body could be great inspiration. Let's study our circulatory system and limbic system to learn how to optimize the distribution of goods, energy, and information throughout the city. a system where life thrives, and every part has a role to play in the bigger picture. Look at how nature works carefully. It operates a time-proven system where there is as much supply as there is demand, no unemployment and no waste. Think about that. Isn't that genius? Now, after this utopic vision of a future city that gets me very excited, let's get back down to today's reality and some very tangible action. Some wonderful initiatives are being birthed. The Living Building Challenge is one of them. It looks at a building as a source of those economic ecosystem benefits discussed rather than a consumer of them. It is the strictest environmental building certification currently achievable. It is a philosophy that goes way beyond technology itself. Let's look at it a bit more detail. Each building needs to produce more energy and water than it uses. I repeat that. Each building needs to produce more energy and water than it uses. Imagine the forms, processes, and systems required to achieve that goal. The material used are strictly assessed and selected for their low environmental impact. And there's a genuine vision for the building to benefit its inhabitants and the local community in meaningful ways. Each building is assessed based on the local conditions it finds itself in. The design must be attuned to local requirements and constraints. As in nature, it is a local approach, not a one-size-fits-all. This is a huge step forward in the way we look at buildings and construction. To have a tool to work with, like the LBC, is a critical step towards mass implementation. This principle could be extended to a neighborhood or a full city. It is called regenerative design. And I'm very happy to say that Brickworks Burwood Retail Complex in Melbourne will be the 24th building in the world and the first retail building in the world to receive this certification. Go Aussies! I wanted to show you also this research that demonstrates nature's genius so well. A Japanese university placed oat flakes or food sources on a map portraying the location of Tokyo and its surrounding cities. Then they placed living slime mold, a type of fungi, at Tokyo CBD location and observed how the slime mold will grow. In other words, what was the most energy efficient travel path for the slime to get to food? The results strikingly resemble the actual railway network of Tokyo. How else could we use that type of methodology? The real exciting part with what I've been talking about and all those examples is that we are really just scratching the surface and the potential of the biomimicry approach. Looking at the bigger picture, let me introduce you to your extended family tree. I like this graph because it gives us a perspective on where we, human beings, sit in the living world. A single species amongst so many others with a common ancestor, 3.8 billion years old. As you can see, so many species have habited our planet for much longer than we have, and have ensured the planet is still habitable for us. It's about the definition of success. Nature's view of success is different from ours. A thriving natural environment for future generations is success. And that's how we must look at it too. I have copied the definition of Homo sapiens from Wikipedia. The Latin root word, as you can see, means wise man or discerning man. Look at those drawings that I found. Fair to say that we interact with our habitat currently is more like a spoiled teenager rather than a wise man, isn't it? So for us, the shift in perception required is about not seeing ourselves as master of the natural world, but rather an integral part of a large and complex ecosystem, very much like an organ in our body. Deeply acknowledging that we are part of something much greater is so humbling. Like immature teenagers, our ego is too big to face this truth. We need to start looking at nature as a mentor rather than a provider of free lunches and a garbage bin. Parents of teenage kids will know what I'm talking about. So it is really a shift in the way we look at things, a shift in perception. Like Einstein famously said, we cannot solve problems with the same thinking used to create them. The solutions of the 20th century have become the problems of the 21st century. I believe one part of the solution comes from applying systems thinking, looking at problems from a holistic view rather than segmenting the approach to solve them. Biologists know and understand nature. They must collaborate with urbanists, architects, designers, infrastructure people, and builders. Let's break the silos in our societies and think in systems. Nature exclusively operates in systems. Our silo approach is not allowing us to see the full picture and the interdependencies between different sectors. To create better urban policies, there must be better communication between people looking after mobility, infrastructure, and energy and water management, but also people in retail, hospitality, workspaces, and landscaping. Biomimicry is an opportunity to allow us to think in systems and break the segmented approach to our challenges. The education system obviously needs to evolve too, to have a more multidisciplinary approach to learning and make the study of natural systems more central. Engineers were the builders of the 20th century. Biologists must become the superstars of the 21st century. The analogy of the surfer is one that I love, and surely one that resonates with Australians. The surfer uses and respects the wave. He doesn't think he is better than it or try to dominate it. He forms a deep connection with the wave and works hand in hand with it to get to his desired outcome. This is the way forward with nature. This touches us to the core of our being, reconnecting us to our true selves, providing us with the meaning we lost in our industrial society. Now, here is the real opportunity. We now have all the scientific tools. We now have the right technology and a much better understanding of the natural world. We also have highly public figures like Sir David Attenborough raising awareness around these issues. And we have an entire generation ready to make a change and bring meaning into their work life. Let's do it. Now, I'd like to talk about another topic close to my heart. It's called biophilia. Again, this is nothing new. It is something that every one of you knows and understands, with different degrees of consciousness. In the last few years, a growing body of scientific research shows that the further you take human beings away from nature, the more issues you create around their mental and physical health. I'll let you run your eyes through those snippets taken from the internet. And we know it, even through the expressions we use. Go and get a bowl of fresh air, or go for a walk outside. It will do you good. How do we explain that, this biophilia concept? Well, here is my theory. The evolution of our human civilization has gone far quicker than the biological evolution of our brains. We have lived with nature, being part of it, for the last 300,000 years. Most of it spent as hunter-gatherers. It is only very recently, in comparison, that we are living away from it in our modern cities. Our brain hasn't had time to catch up. Through the evolutionary process, our brain has been wired to constantly engage with nature through our 5 senses, making us deeply connected to it. Watching a sunset or a mountain landscape, listening to birds chirping, or the sound of the ocean, or the sound of a waterfall, the smell of flowers, or the smell of rain, the feeling of patting the dog, or the feeling of the sand between our toes when we walk on the beach. And finally, taste. The taste of all the wonderful ingredients nature provides us with. We certainly can't recreate that. As a result, our brain has an intrinsic need to engage with nature. It is an innate need at a biological level. This has very much been visible during the COVID crisis. The lack of exposure to the natural world was driving people crazy. Just going out in the park for some air or sun became so precious. And that brings us back to the ecosystem benefit that we talked about earlier, around mental and physical health. How good does it feel to go to the country, the hills or the beach on holidays, or even for a picnic in the local park? Nature is an integral part of social cohesion. Not to mention cultural values. Remember James Cameron's fantastic movie Avatar and The Tree of Souls? What a great movie, delivering such a profound message around our relationship with the living world. I'm also thinking about the importance of trees in all native people beliefs, including the Aboriginal. As for the city, this is our heritage. Traditionally, the city's mandate was to protect its inhabitants from the external world. We have erected walls to fend off mosquitoes, predators, thieves, or the unknown in general, essentially keeping nature out. Traditionally, nature has been used as an ornamental feature in our cities, without really thinking beyond. Now we realize the need to let nature back in. On the back of the scientific studies discussed, a new discipline has emerged, called Biophilic Design. Biophilic design emphasizes the need to integrate a lot of natural elements within the building. Lots of natural light, plenty of plants, running water for the sound of water, fresh air. It also recommends the use of natural building materials, such as timber, stone, or mud, to name a few. Those materials are also not polluting the indoor air we breathe. And finally, you must use shapes that remind us of a natural world. There is no rectangular or square shapes in nature. This is why people from all over the planet fall in love with buildings like the Sydney Opera House, because it speaks directly to our subconscious. Through all those design features, we can create much more pleasant buildings and cities to live in. This is how to shape attractive cities. Biophilic design can obviously also be applied to designing our homes. We now understand why a room with a view or a sea-facing property is worth more. This is one of a rare examples where ecosystem benefits are given a real economic value. Nature and biophilia offers such a huge pedagogic potential to help people reconnect and wonder at the natural world. Have you ever seen a kid connecting with nature? It's beautiful, revealing deep-rooted behaviors. Biophilia obviously refers to our relationship with the natural world, but it also speaks to our relationship with each other as biological beings. As we've seen through the COVID crisis, how difficult it is to live away from each other. We need those interactions because once again, we are nature and we need each other as much as we need nature. So let me tie all this up with what I currently do. After I discovered the topic of biomimicry and biophilia, I set out to find a company to work with. The plan was to bridge the gap between my professional skill set and my personal beliefs. This is how I came across Urban Canopy and its remarkable offering. Our cities face many challenges, and it must learn to deal with them. Starting with rapid urbanization. We saw earlier in the presentation that 55% of the world population lived in city. This is set to increase to 75% by the end of the century, putting further stress on those small densely populated areas. This often results in increased air pollution for the sheer amount of human activity in those centers. We know that pollution costs millions of lives globally in our cities. But also the increasing issues around global warming. Our cities suffer from a phenomenon known as urban heat island effect. In an urban environment, the landscape is made out of heat-absorbing materials, concrete, asphalt, bricks, all far more absorbing than the natural landscape. As a result, a highly urbanized area are usually few degrees warmer than its surrounding, where you find more nature. In Australia alone, known for its heat waves, this is causing thousands of deaths every year and making the city a very uncomfortable place to be in on those 40-odd degree days. Not the definition of an attractive city. Those challenges are what Urban Canopy sets out to provide a solution for. I'll introduce Urban Canopy by showing you this short video. Sit comfortably, grab some popcorn, and enjoy the show.
The urban canopers, alien beings from another planet. Their destination are cities. Their purpose, to green them up and cool them down. David Vincent has seen them. The tale begins one sultry night in a very dense city while he was looking for an island of freshness that he never found. It began with the arrival of these strange urban canopers. Now, David Vincent knows that the urban canopers are here. They have taken human form and have started to green up the cities. Somehow, he must convince a disenchanted world that the dream has already begun.
Very Hollywood, isn't it? Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Increasing green areas in our cities has indeed been proven to be the most efficient and the most sustainable way to combat urban heat island effect. And this is on top of all the biophilia benefit we saw before. So who are we and where do we come from? And no, it isn't from another planet. Urban Canopy started with a group of researchers at the prestigious civil engineering school, École des Ponts in Paris. This school was created by Napoleon to gather engineering skills around the building of roads and bridges to support the expansion of the empire. At the time, those were the guys who invented cement. Well, that group of researchers has been working for the past 10 years on an alternative lightweight building material called grid shell. Here you can see a temporary cathedral built while the main one was being renovated. It is quick to deploy, strong, easy to relocate, and lightweight. 4.5 years ago, one researcher thought, how great would it be if we could use those structures as support for climbing planks to green up the city? He spoke about his idea to the entrepreneurship teacher of the school, who loved the idea, and the company concept was created. the very first product had a very specific scope. How can we, with a minimum footprint, create the largest canopy cover? The large funnel shape that you see, a shape inspired by nature, funny that, flowers, mushrooms, came out to be the most mathematically sound structure to meet that scope. A few months later, Urban Canopy was born. Since then, over 15 canopy have been installed all over France, in cities like Toulouse, Marseille, and Paris. The oldest installations so far are about a year old. We expect full canopy cover within 2 to 3 years. Today, most people are aware that having more vegetation in our cities makes a lot of sense, for all the obvious reasons already discussed. However, the current technologies, trees or parks, are very hard to implement. As we've seen earlier, integration of nature wasn't part of a design brief when designing our cities. In many spaces, the ground is already covered up and cannot be dug up. Trees are fantastic, but they just cannot work in many urban areas. Their root system can damage underground services, water, electricity, gas. Their unpredictable growth can lead to issues with surrounding overhead structures. Parks are even harder to implement because of the space required and financial interests surrounding real estate. So our solution allows to work with those existing constraints and provide an easy and scalable way to accelerate the greening of our cities. The canopy is modular, self-standing, relocatable, and lightweight. It is also autonomous in water and energy, not requiring expensive connection to water mains or electricity. A built-in smart irrigation system provides ideal growing conditions for the plants while managing water, a precious resource requiring careful management. Our canopies provide the benefits of trees where trees cannot be planted. Our large canopies are 5 meters high and provide 50 square meters of shade area. They are mainly going to be installed in public areas within councils and other large private areas. But we also have our mini canopy, which is only 3 meters high, which is already pretty tall. It provides 20 square meters of shade area, which suits private area very well. Those can be used on cafe or restaurant terraces, as you see on the picture, but also could be used next to your pool at home, in shopping centers, hospitals, schools, hotels, and balconies around the place. Everywhere where having trees would make sense, but cannot be done. Here is a short video modeling what a currently fully concreted area, deprived of nature, could look like with our solutions. Again, it is about fighting heat in our cities while creating spaces to relax and reconnect with nature, to reap all the benefits provided by Biophilia. Canopy is our very first product, but certainly not the last. We have very large ambitions with our solutions. We hope to cover as much of a city as possible with plants, to cool it down. In achieving this target, roof and facades are critical elements. Again, existing technologies are costly and difficult to implement at scale. I'm thinking about green walls or green roofs. They are currently mainly being used in brand new developments where the building design accommodates nature from day dot. However, the bulk of a city is not new developments. It is the existing building landscape. As you saw with the example of our temporary cathedral, our technology allows us to create any shape we want. Now imagine structure wrapping themselves around the top of any building. being retrofitted to existing building to add a green layer. This is what we're currently working on. The big picture would be able to approach any city and work with them on a citywide natural aircon system. Quite ambitious indeed, but very achievable. In the meantime, this is the short-term future we want to see for Australia, shaping our Australian cities to remain and become even more attractive cities. Now, thank you for your time and your attention. The topic discussed today are very close to my heart, and I hope you got something out of this talk. I also deeply believe in business as a force for good to meaningfully impact the world. This is what the B Corp certification stands for. It is a label or certification, a bit like the ISO standards, granted to companies that have a positive social and environmental impact. I'll finish on that. For those interested in Urban Canopy, I can be contacted on the details on the screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you shortly in the live Q&A.